a webinar, so not too many participants.
Okay, okay.
So, Bu Ratna, can we start?
Whenever you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you think? Can we start now?
So can we
We
start
have
now?
actually we have 287
And 77, yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Mm-hmm.
268
Mm.
participants who have registered. So it's still counting.
Mm.
Do we need to wait or
Can we just
can
wait
I
for
start?
about 5 minutes? Is that okay? So just 5 more
Absolutely
minutes.
fine. Sure,
All right.
sure.
Okay, thank you. Oke, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu peserta juga nih yang baru datang ya. Kita nunggu dulu 5 menit. 5 menit ya. Sambil peserta lainnya untuk gabung. Selamat pagi teman-teman nih dari Universitas Siliwangi dan Universitas Singapura Bangsa juga, dan dari kampus-kampus yang lain ya, Mbak Bita juga. Halo Mbak Bita ya. Ini banyak juga nih yang nggak bisa saya sapa satu-satu nih.
Okay, Kang Jun, we can begin.
Kita bisa mulai aja Pak Henry.
Okay, can we start now?
Ya. Dimulai saja.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar organized by English Language Education Department Association, APSPBI West Java Chapter, in collaboration with Department of English Education, Universitas Swadaya Gunung Jati UGJ, Universitas Singapura Bangsa Karawang, Universitas Ibnu Khaldun, Universitas Selatan Samafiro, and STKIP Pasundan. My name is Ratna Andika, and on behalf of the organizing committee, we are very delighted to have all of you here at this event today, that for approximately an hour ahead, we will gain very insightful presentation from our outstanding speaker today, Professor Sue Startfield from UNSW Sydney, about writing PhD proposal. Well, so in this time, I would like to welcome to the presidents of APBSI, Pak Paulus Kuswandono, PhD from Sanata Dharma University. And I would like to welcome also the chairman of APSPBI for West Java Chapter, Pak Henry Wanto, MPD. And good morning also to the board of APBSI, ya, Pak for West Java Chapter, Pak Eli, Ibu Maulidia, and Ibu Martina. Also Pak Junjun, who will be the moderator for this webinar. And actually we have 268 participants across the country, not only from West Java, but also from Aceh to Papua. So once again, thank you very much for your participations. And as the commencements of this agenda, I would like to kindly request the presidents of APBSI, Pak Paulus Kuswandono, PhD, to give the opening remark. Please, Pak Paulus.
Thank you, Ibu Ratna, for the opportunity. Good morning, everybody. I hope we are all well and blessed with happiness and immune system also in this pandemic situation. We need that. First of all, I would like to, on behalf of the National Board of the English Language Education Study Program, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Sue Startfield from the UNSW Sydney, and also our moderator, Bapak Junjun Ramdhani, the PhD candidate from UNSW Sydney, as well as the West Java Regional Board and members of the English Language Education Study Program, West Java Chapter, and all the participants who I cannot mention one by one. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our webinar, which takes a very crucial issue on our today's theme, that is preparing and writing PhD research proposal. I'm really interested in this topic, not only that it is relevant to those who are preparing for their doctoral study, but in fact also for the lecturers who are continually writing their academic journals for their professional development. So yeah, very brief. In fact, the welcoming speech from me. I hope that we can learn a lot of values from this seminar, and hope that we can continually pursue our academic excellence. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Pak Paulus. Well, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, now I would like to kindly invite Pak Junjun Ramdhani, PhD candidate from UNSW, to lead the session. Pak Junjun, please.
Okay, thank you. But I think Sustafi is not here. Wait. Kita tunggu dulu ya, mungkin sempat karena koneksi karena beliau. Sebentar ya, para peserta teman-teman. Kayaknya beliau keluar barusan kayaknya. Saya coba hubungi dulu beliau. Mungkin sambil nunggu itu, mungkin Pak Henry ada yang mau disampaikan dulu selaku koordinator mungkin ke teman-teman seperti apa. Silahkan.
Pak Henry,
ya,
please, as the coordinator of APSPBI for West Java chapter.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Sambil menunggu Sus David memberikan webinar pada hari ini, saya melihat latar belakang dari partisipan dari berbagai disiplin ilmu ya. Untuk itu izinkan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia sebagai national lingua franca. Nah, baik, dari agenda 2021 akan banyak sekali kita berikan, namun belum melalui program kerja rapat kerja wilayah gitu ya. Dan kita mengikuti rapat kerja nasional nanti dari Pak Paulus, mungkin ada turunan yang bisa diturunkan di wilayah. Untuk itu bagi Bapak Ibu yang di 2021 ingin terlibat langsung di beberapa agenda APSPBI, kami mengingatkan beberapa hal. Pertama, bahwa APBSI milik kita semua, ini program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggris, tapi partisipannya banyak dari luar bahasa Inggris juga. Nah, untuk itu bagi yang institusi yang belum memperpanjang keanggotaan maupun per individu yang belum memperpanjang keanggotaan di tahun 2021, mohon untuk dapat segera melakukan administrasi. Itu beberapa yang bisa saya sampaikan. Mungkin kita ke Sulsafet, gimana Pak Jun?
Sudah ada.
Ya. Dimulai aja Pak Jun.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right. So before we start our session, so I think I'd like to read also a brief review of Professor Sue Starfield. And Sue Starfield is a professor at the School of Education at UNSW Sydney, and then she is an editor emeritus of English for Specific Purposes. She co-edited the Handbook of English for Specific Purposes with Brian Partridge from University of Sydney. And the second editions of her co-authored book, Thesis and Dissertation Writing in a Second Language, has just been published in 2020 by Routledge. And then she also co-edits two book series with Routledge in the field of EAP, Introductions to English for Specific Purposes, and Research in English for Specific Purposes. I think I have also experience to engage in her class for writing PhD thesis for one term last year. I think without further explanations, I think please welcome Professor Sue Starfield. Sue, the floor is yours, I think. All right, wait. Okay.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Junjun, and the committee and everyone for turning up, and thank you for this invitation. I'm very honored to be invited to meet with you and talk with you today. So Junjun asked me to talk about writing a PhD thesis proposal. So I've got some slides which I'll probably share with you and just talk to them if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
And then hopefully we'll have time for questions.
Yeah.
At the end. Is that okay?
Yeah, and then you have like an hour presentations, I think so. And then there will be like 20 minutes QA sessions.
Sure. Well, let's see how I go.
Okay.
I might not need to talk for the whole hour, but let's see how we get on. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. Henry, please assign Sue to become a co-host.
Yeah, this is done.
Okay.
Can you see it? Can you see it now? Yeah, your screen. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so when I thought about this talk that Junjun asked me to prepare for you, it struck me that there are two types of proposals that we see, and I'm very much talking today from my position here in Australia, and particularly last year where I was the School of Education at UNSW Sydney's. I was the postgraduate coordinator in the school, which meant I was responsible for evaluating applications to enroll in a PhD at my university. And then I'm also obviously a supervisor. And as the postgraduate coordinator as well, one of my jobs was to review students at the end of their first 9 months to 1 year when they present a developed research proposal in order to be confirmed as a candidate and be able to carry out their actual research. So it's led me to think that there's actually two types of proposals. They're very similar, but they have different purposes that a prospective PhD student would be asked to write. So the first one would be when you're actually applying to be accepted into a PhD program. And it probably differs from one university to the other, but I think there's a lot of common expectations. So that's when you apply to a university outside of Indonesia and say in Australia, you will be asked to develop a proposal and submit that as part of your application. So, sorry, that just was a terrible noise. That means you have to write, well, from the Australian perspective, we'd be expecting about 2,000 words of a proposal where you would outline the main area that you're interested in, why it's worth carrying out a study, show that you're familiar with some of the literature, and put forward the methods that you would want to use, and write it in a way that's comprehensible and clear to follow and so on. Because on the basis of that short proposal, which you would share first with a prospective supervisor, your application would be considered further or not to see if you meet all the requirements in terms of your qualifications and experience and so on. And then the other kind of proposal is the proposal that once you've got through that hurdle and you're accepted and you're enrolled in the university, you have 9 months to 1 year to prepare for what we call your confirmation. And then you're expected to write a much more developed, like 10,000 word document, more or less, which outlines how you will carry out your study and why it's worth doing. So as I say, they're quite related, but they have different purposes. The one is to get your supervisor to agree to accept you and to get the university to agree to accept you. And the other is I'm accepted, but I want to be given permission to actually do the research and show that I have a study that is feasible, doable, achievable, and is going to produce some significant, interesting findings, and that you work on with your supervisor once you're in the university. So the proposal is a very key first step in the whole process. So it is important to really put in time and effort and draft a good proposal, because it's going to determine your future academic trajectory. So it's going to provide the rationale and motivation for your study, And it really does demand of you that you think logically through the entire project, from what it would look like at the beginning to the end product. And as I've just said, there's two versions of the proposal. The one is the pre-entry, and the other is once you're through the door and enrolled, you know, really spending time reading extensively, talking to people, beginning to write that document for confirmation, which we call a research proposal. Now, Pat Thompson, who some of you may know, she writes a blog called Patter, and this is the link to her blog site. I really recommend this blog highly, and it's in the reference list at the end. She wrote one of her posts a while ago about the research proposal, and I think it's worth looking at what she said. She said the purpose of a research proposal is a bid by the author to gain acceptance into a community, to demonstrate that the researcher, that's you, has the capacity to produce disciplinary knowledge. So the proposal signals to your reader, who is either the prospective future supervisor or your current supervisor, and a small panel of researchers in the school where you're enrolled, that you are capable of producing knowledge in your field. And in order to be able to do this, as a proposal writer, you must show that you're familiar with the right language, how knowledge is produced in this community that you're seeking to join. You're aware of what the current debates in your field are, and also what she calls taken for granted truths. So you have a kind of critical approach as well. So you can question things, because that might be how you're going to show that you're adding something new, by saying, well, you know, all these people have looked at this, but no one's really looked at this, and this is going to be the topic of my study. So it's about showing that you're ready to participate in or join this community of scholars who've been working in this area. You are sort of familiar with how people speak and write in this field because you've done quite a lot of reading around the topic, and you want to make a contribution. And that's what you have to demonstrate in your proposal. So as I said, you're trying to persuade your reader, and it's never, for a proposal, the readership is quite small, but it's quite important because you're really communicating in the first place with a prospective supervisor. So you've identified someone from the school website or because you know their work and you've read it, and you want to make a connection with them to ask them if they'd be prepared to supervise you. And remember that supervisors are getting many, many requests, like weekly. We'll get 1 or 2 requests from people from all over the world wanting to study with us. And so we have to be quite careful when we look at a proposal. It's really got to speak to us and say something to us that grabs our attention and looks as if it's got something interesting to say. So you must show that you've got a topic that's worth studying. We don't just want studies that repeat what other people have been doing. We want a new angle. It doesn't have to be huge, but something a bit different. And sometimes that comes from your context, where you're living and working, that no one in your context has looked at this topic before. So you kind of have to make an argument for why your study is worth doing. And you might start off initially just by emailing the prospective supervisor and saying, hello, can I introduce myself? This is what I'm interested in. Would you be interested in? And it might just be a page or half a page. And then you can send them something more developed. Because if it's my university, for example, when you fill in the expression of interest form, one of the questions we ask is, have you been in contact with this prospective supervisor? We ask you to put a name in. And then it's useful to see, yes, I've had email contact. Yes, I've spoken to them on the phone or on Zoom or whatever. So it's good to just make that contact through email. And if they're interested, they'll get back to you and respond, and you can take it from there. So we want to study an area, the topic area that's worthy of studying. We feel there's more work that could be done. We don't know enough. It's relevant and of interest to the community. So those are the kind of things. It's something that's going to be worth investing 3 or 4 years of your life and your supervisor's life in studying. So really what you might call the core components of a proposal that you need to have in any proposal, whether it's a short one or a much longer one. Make it clear what the aims of your research project are. What do you hope to find out, hope to achieve? The scope, how big it is, how broad it is. Show that, you know, you can't do everything. No one can do everything in a PhD. So, you know, where you're going to carry out the study. Oh, what's happened now? My screen stopped sharing. What's significant or original about your project? In other words, how is it going to contribute? And how does it relate to previous work in the field? So how do we know, how do we show that? We review some of the literature. So the reason you've chosen the topic that you're putting forward is because you're already interested. You might be working in this area. You might have done a master's and you want to continue and take that further. You've been reading about it. People are talking about it. So there's previous study that has been done. I mean, sometimes I know it can be difficult to get hold of published academic work, scholarly work, depending on your access to libraries and what the libraries can afford, you know, and make available to you. But bear in mind that these days it is much easier to keep up to date with the literature because of sites like ResearchGate and academia.edu, where academics from around the world are sharing their work much more openly. So once you know, if you can't find the journals in a library near you or somewhere on the internet, you can look on ResearchGate or academia.edu, and you can, if the articles aren't up there, you can write to the author. I mean, I get emails very regularly from people all around the world asking me to share my papers, and I'm always happy to do that. I think academics are pleased to do that. So don't feel that it's a burden for them. And because it's very important to show that you're up to date. So when we get that first proposal from you, where you just approach us and say, I'm interested in doing a PhD with you, this is my topic, here's a brief proposal, have a reasonably up-to-date literature review. In other words, when I look at a proposal and all the references are from the 1990s, I get concerned because I feel that that potential student hasn't kept up to date. Of course, there's been some articles from the 1990s or even the early 2000s, which is now 20 years ago, that are relevant and useful, and we shouldn't ignore those articles. But it's very important to show that you're at least familiar with much more recent work in the field. Because that also shows us that you're motivated and you're keen and you're keeping up to date. Then you should also sketch out your method, like broadly, are you proposing to do a quantitative study or a qualitative study or maybe a mixed method study, and say why, and give us a bit of an idea about the method to be adopted. Because that also gives us an indication of, like, if someone's approaching me and they want to do a totally quantitative study, I'm probably going to say I'm not the right supervisor for you because I do qualitative research. So it is important to be aware of what kind of methodology or methods that potential supervisor uses, so you can show that you've researched and there's a fit between you. If it's the full proposal that you're doing for confirmation, you need to have a provisional chapter plan, like an outline of the whole thesis, to show you've thought about it, and, you know, a brief summary of probably each chapter, a couple of sentences, and then a provisional timeline for future progress, like what you'll be doing in year 2, year 3, year 4. So, and every year, if you're studying at University of New South Wales, we have annual reviews. So you need to update your timeline, need to submit a chapter from your work or evidence of progress every year for an annual review as well. So I thought I would quickly talk about the differences as I see them between a master's and a PhD in terms of the proposal. And in fact, it's the difference in terms of the final thesis too. So I think that a lot of you will have done a master's project of some kind, a dissertation or a thesis. Some people have probably done a master's by research, and some of you may have done coursework plus a dissertation. So that is an original study that you've carried out and independently working with a supervisor, but a master's project tends to be much smaller scale and often just like one study or something like that. But it does demonstrate that you are competent in doing independent work. You have some understanding of research methods. So those are all good things. Hopefully the master's also, you should show you have been able to be critical of existing research. And you're aware of the wider field of, there's your topic and then the field that surrounds it and how your topic sits in that broader field, and that you must, present a well-written thesis that's edited, that doesn't have too many mistakes and so on. So all of that you need for a PhD too. But the big difference, I think, between a master's and a PhD is this idea of the original contribution to knowledge, which you will hear people talk about a lot. And original doesn't mean that you're splitting the atom or something incredibly huge. It can be quite small. And in a minute, I'm going to talk more about how we can understand what an original contribution is, but you do need to show it. So and that's one of the criteria when your thesis eventually goes out to examination. Examiners are asked to comment on whether your thesis is an original and significant contribution to knowledge. And it's something that we look for in journal articles too, when we're an editor of a journal or a reviewer. Is there something novel here? Is there an original contribution? And it's something that we often have to spell out for our readers, like in your final thesis. You need to tell the reader how your thesis is contributing. And even in the I'm seeing somebody else's screen, Rashida.
So,
I don't know why.
So sorry, wait for a moment. Yes, yeah. All right, maybe you can have a share again. So thank you.
Okay. Let's see. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just talking about the idea of a significant and original contribution to knowledge, which is really the key differentiation between a master's and a PhD. So you are bringing something new, a novel, and as I was saying, you need to also tell your readers. So sometimes when we're a student, we're very modest and we feel like, I'm writing this thesis as a student, I'm a novice, my supervisor is a very brilliant person and my examiners are really intelligent people. So I don't need to tell them what the contribution is, but in fact you do, however brilliant they are. It's like an expectation in the genre of the thesis that we do need to kind of modestly say how our study will demonstrate new knowledge. And if you go online to any universities in Australia or in the US or the UK for that matter, and look at some completed PhDs, you'll see that they typically do tell the reader what the contribution is. This thesis is significant, my study is contributing in such and such a way, etc. And demonstrate authority. So by the end of the 3.5, 4 years of doing that PhD, you become the expert in that area. That's the process, your sort of trajectory, going from the beginner to the expert. And your thesis needs to show that. And the proposal also needs to kind of show that you're developing expertise in this. And the other big differences, obviously, between the PhD and the master's is the PhD is bigger in scope. It goes deeper because you're spending so much more time on it. And it's longer. So typically a PhD in Australia is 80,000 to 100,000 words. And typically they're coming in at around 80,000 words. Whereas a master's by research is about 40. If you've done a master's coursework, it could be 20, 15,000. So the length is also a big differentiator. So when you apply, say, if you're applying to UNSW, just as an example of a university that I know very well now, we want to know about your previous study. So you tell us you did a master's, you tell us where, you tell us the grade you got, provide as much information as you can. It makes it easier for us. And when you submit, the first thing you do is submit an expression of interest form, which is on the website. And then we ask you to also submit other documents, like, so if you've done a master's thesis, which you should have done if you're going for a PhD, unless you come straight from honors, we would like to see a copy of that thesis. So often we're following up with students and saying, please send us a copy of your thesis, because we want to see that you've actually done the research, that you know a little bit about how to carry out research. So that's really good evidence for us to see. So don't, feel embarrassed about sharing it. It's important to do that. So then I'll move on to my next slide, where I'd wanted to just talk a little bit more about originality. So the idea of originality can seem scary because people feel I've got to do something enormously original, groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be something that no one's ever done before, because it can be building on other people's work. And it always is, really, because you identify what we call a research gap or research space in the work of other people. So you're always building on people who've come before you. So it can be that you say something no one's ever said before, but that's probably the least likely, because you're always building on other people's work. And that's why we do the literature review. But you might be, this whole list comes from Rowena Murray's book, How to Write a Thesis, which is a terrific book. So you might do a study, empirical work that's not been done before. Of course, if you're in Indonesia, you might be looking at doing a study that people might have carried out a similar study in other countries or other parts of the world, but no one's ever carried it out in Indonesia, or they might have only done a very small study, or there's still more to do in your context. So sometimes our context can be an important source of originality or novelty. But sometimes you're putting things together that people haven't put together. You might be looking at someone's work and reinterpreting. You do something in a country that's not only been done elsewhere, as I just said. You might be taking new techniques, applying them to new areas. You might be doing an interdisciplinary study, drawing on various branches of knowledge and using different methodologies. Like you might want to look at a topic, for example, that people have looked at very quantitatively, and you might want to be arguing, well, no one's really got a qualitative approach to this topic area. What about if I went and interviewed the people who'd used this corpus-based approach or something? You know what I mean? So you can have a different methodology, which could be your original contribution, or it could be mixed methods. You're adding in interviews to a survey, that kind of thing. So you might be bringing in new topics, new theories that people haven't looked at. And as I said, building on the work of others. So it's important to think, like, how is my study going to be original, and how can I tell people about that? So here in the next few slides, I wanted to talk a tiny bit about the writing. And I'm sure Junjun, I don't know if you remember this slide. That's one I always use in my
I think my class,
talk about writing in academic English. And I think it's just a useful bit of information to have in one's mind. So quite a long time ago now, some big people may be familiar with this idea if you're English language teachers. People started writing about this idea of some languages being more writer responsible and some being more reader responsible. So you see, I've got this sort of continuum here between writer responsible and reader responsible. So of course, this idea has subsequently been critiqued, but I still think it is very useful to think about. So certain languages are seen to be more at the writer responsible end of the continuum, where others are more reader responsible. So what does this mean in practice? That if you, and I said academic English is writer responsible. So if your language is more over this end, the implications for writing are that it's your responsibility as a writer to help the reader as much as possible. So that's why in academic English, you get all the signposting and you get the, firstly, secondly, subsequently, finally, really guiding the reader through and helping them understand your argument. And in something like a PhD, which is a long work, 80,000 words, there's a lot of signposting and helping the reader. What are the main arguments? Introducing each chapter with an overview, having little reviews when you go over what you said, little summaries. We do a lot of that just to help the reader, who's an examiner mostly or a supervisor. So that's being writer responsible. And we have, clear topic sentences at the beginning of paragraphs, followed up by supporting evidence, that kind of thing. If, however, maybe your first language or one of your first languages are more on the reader responsible end, to do too much writer responsible work is considered insulting to the reader. The reader is seen as a highly intelligent person who can figure out your arguments, and they'll be offended by too much signposting. So if you're tending to come from this kind of first language writing background, you may need to start thinking in a more writer responsible way. And it might be quite difficult at first to transition to doing all the signposting and repetitions. You don't want to go overboard, but I think it's important to think about and have in your mind, because it could be a barrier to communicating your ideas and your thoughts. So once you've got your ideas out, probably go through and just edit and see, is there a clear argument coming through? Have I made it easy for my reader to follow my line of argument? Is it coming through logically and clearly? Get somebody else to read through your proposal, and can they see a clear sort of line of argument and the paragraphs all linking through clear topic sentences? And in the second edition of our book, we have a little section on that, and I've put the reference in there. And also just a couple of tips for writing the literature review. So every proposal will have a literature review, and it is going to be quite a big component of that pre-proposal as well as the final document for confirmation, which is usually a shortish introduction of a few pages. And the bulk of it is the literature review, and then there's a methodology component. Those are typically the three main sections, with the literature review being like 5,000 to 6,000 words, the methodology being maybe 2, and then the intro being, not sure if I'm adding up to 10, but the balance, that's the kind of balance of it. So there's a lot of literature review. In your first year as a PhD student, you will be doing a lot of reading. And of course, when you're doing all that reading, you should be making notes, and you should be starting to draft that literature review, start writing very early on. And when you're reading all these studies that people have done, make sure you also look at the methodology, because you'll be reviewing methodology as well and helping to build an argument, a rationale for your choice of methodology through the works of other people too, like what methodologies they've used and what they found or haven't found. So just a few tips from this book by Rudestam and Newton. The reference is in the reference list at the end of my slides. When you write it to sound more like you own the ideas and the thinking, don't start every sentence with the names of the authors you're reading, because that sounds like it gives them too much authority, and you want to sound like you understand all these ideas. So because you're wanting to develop your argument for why your study is important. So of course you have to reference their work, but it's better to do that probably in brackets, and use themes in a literature review. So try and develop a few themes, and then you can have sort of sections on the different themes, and using the work of other people to help support your arguments. Try not to quote other writers too much. So we don't want to see a literature review that's just chunks of block quotes with the work of other people. We want to see that you've integrated those ideas into your thinking, and they're helping support your thinking. So in a literature review, say in the final thesis, we will typically don't want to see page after page with block quotes like this, quoting other people. Be very selective in your quoting. And also, you don't have to report every single thing that you read, so be a bit selective. Now, I wanted to also say a few things about the literature review, about the methodology. So Christian Carzenave, my colleague in the US, she's written a book called Before the Dissertation, which is actually full of useful advice for people even long before you've even sort of enrolled or even seriously thought about it. She provides a lot of things to think about in this Before the Dissertation. Now she's written a new book called During the Dissertation, which is also very full of helpful advice. So one of the wise things that she says is to do not embark on a methodological approach that you're likely to hate, because that's going to be your life for 3 or 4 years. So you want to have something that you're actually going to enjoy doing. So if you're a person who really is good with numbers and stats and that kind of thing, and you enjoy quantitative work, that might be best for you. If you're a person like me who really isn't great with numbers and doesn't really see the point of a lot of statistics, and you enjoy being with people and talking to them, maybe a qualitative approach is more for you, something more ethnographic. So Chris Carzenave also recommends seeking an advisor who is philosophically compatible with you and who can guide your development. And I think that is important. I mean, if you're in another country, I know it's hard, but it's really worth spending time reading the profiles of potential supervisors on their websites. I think every academic in the world now has a website where they talk about their work. You can Google them, find out what they're working on, what they're researching on, what they've published recently. And you can figure out who might be the person you think you could work with. You might be able to listen to them giving a talk at a conference. It's worth doing your own research to try and find the right supervisor for you. I mean, it's not always possible. But I think, because my experience is that people from around the world just tend to sort of mass email out the same letter to academics at hundreds of universities, because I know that often I've had an inquiry from a prospective student and my colleagues have had exactly the same letter. And that is not really going to get you very far. It's much a better investment of your time to target particular academics, because you can sort of think you would really want to work with them, not just mass email everyone, because that indicates that you're not really that serious. Well, to us anyway, you haven't put in the work to see, am I really compatible, or might I be compatible with that particular person? So I didn't want to go into methodology and methods too much in this talk. And there are so many handbooks on doing research which do talk about these things in more detail. But methodology is really the broader term, the broader category, referring to the theoretical paradigm or framework. So quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, ethnography, those are the broader paradigms. And methods are the actual methods, the research instruments that you're going to use, like interviews, surveys, participant observation, discourse analysis. Those could be methods. So I've got another slide that just diagrammatically tries to represent the difference between, when we talk about methodology, sometimes the people use these terms as if they mean the same thing, but it's good to maybe distinguish them. Now, the next part of my talk, I just wanted to share with you some, I call them tools that I've developed to help people think through the proposal. So we can't really work, if it was a workshop, I might get you to actually try out some of these tools, but we can't really do that. So I'm just going to share them with you. And I hope that when the time is right for you, you can maybe use them as prompts or tools to help you clarify your thinking. And they're tools that can be worked through many times as your thinking evolves, as you prepare your proposal. So the first one is what we call the 4 questions framework. And it's just 4 questions. What is the question I'm trying to answer? Why is it worth answering? How have other people tried to answer it? and how am I going to go about answering it? So when you look at what I normally do is I give my students a sheet with these questions and there's space under each question for them to write. You can do it on a computer if you want. So try and answer the 4 questions, because the 4 questions are at the heart of the PhD. They're at the heart of the proposal, and they're like the scaffold of the whole thing. So what is the question I'm trying to answer? And this is going to change as you know, go from the early stages when you just have some vague ideas to much later when you've got a much clearer idea of a question that you want to seek an answer to. So you just take some time, you sit down on the computer or you print this out as a piece of paper and try and write. I think handwriting is actually quite good. What is the question I'm trying to answer? And try and crystallize your thoughts. It's quite good to do it if you're in a small group with other people as well, then you can share and discuss as well afterwards. So obviously key to any proposal is having a question. Often we have more than one question, but one main question, some sub-questions. What is the question I'm trying to answer? Because when you submit that final research proposal to your supervisor, and through that whole year, you know, you need to come up with at least one question that's worth answering. So why is it worth answering? Why is it worth spending 3 years examining this topic and researching it? What do I hope to learn? How will it benefit my community? How will it benefit the field? What's the, why am I bothering? We sometimes call that the why bother or the so what question. Like, you know, what is the purpose, the point of it all? How have other people tried to answer it? That's obviously the literature. So you might jot down the key literature in your field as you're aware of it today. What have they found? What's still missing? And then how am I going to go about answering it? Is your approach, your research design? What's the approach you're going to take? So those are the key 4 questions. The next tool is one for the literature review. So what I normally do is give people a sheet with these 3 intersecting circles, and I ask people to brainstorm. What are the key authors or the key themes in the literature that you're reading around your topic and where they intersect? So there's typically, particularly for PhD, there's more than one body of literature. Often they're, you know, related areas that we're looking at. Identity, language learning, academic writing. You might have, you know, these 3 areas, they intersect somewhere. That's where you'll begin to identify your topic. So again, print out something like this, take a pen and start writing for yourself. It really helps you get it on top of your thinking. And you can do this many times. So that's why I call these things tools. They're really tools to help you develop and progress your thinking. And this is where we get to a tool for the why bother question. Why is my question worth answering? Again, use your computer or print it out on a piece of paper. Ask yourself, my topic or question is significant because, and actually write out, because it's, you know, it's a different matter to think it in your head, but to actually have to articulate it and put it on paper really focuses you to come. And then think about the contribution of your study, because that's very important. Because you do need to indicate how you think your study is going to contribute. And there are many ways in which our research can contribute. But these are just some of them. It could contribute theoretically. It could contribute empirically. You're going to go and do a study, maybe in a classroom, in a community. You're going to find out information, empirical data. You're going to collect it. That could be part of your contribution. It might be that you're doing research that has a social or political contribution to make. And particularly in education, we might be contributing to practice, to pedagogy, to educational policy. We might be contributing in several areas. We need to be able to put it into words and articulate it. So use this tool to help you articulate what you think the contribution of your study might be. And that can go into your proposal document under significance or contribution, typically be a heading like that. So finally, the other little tool that I have is called the 2-pager. And this comes from a recommendation by a guy who's written a great book on developing research proposals called Keith Punch, and he's in the reference list again. And he developed this little technique. He says just write 2 pages using single spacing, no more, and describe as clearly and directly as possible what your proposed research is trying to find out and how it will do it. And he says, focus more on what I'm trying to find out and how am I going to do it. And don't worry so much about the context, the background, the literature. So he's really trying to get you to crystallize the essence of your whole study. And as I say, it's a work in progress document. You can do multiple 2 pages as you go through the process. It's really nice. I used to teach this course called Developing a Research Proposal with students who were just in their first term. And I would get them to do the 2-pager in class or come to class with a 2-pager and then swap with a partner and give each other feedback. And students found that very helpful. So if you have a group of colleagues or friends, I really recommend sort of coming to share with each other. You can do it. Last year I did it online when we were in lockdown. I did it online with a class of doctoral students, and I put them in small groups online and they shared their 2-pager, and they found it really helpful for just being able to put down in writing and then talk with someone else and get feedback on their 2-pager. So those are, as I say, just some tools, that's my word for them, that I think could be helpful in helping you develop your thinking. But back to the actual document, what does it look like? So now I'm really talking more about the thesis proposal at the end of your first year, but these headings are relevant too for the prospective research proposal when you're still looking for a supervisor, apart from the last few components like the table of contents, the timetable. So these are just headings you could use in a proposal. On the left, the different headings, you can see like significance is one of them. All the key ones, intro, background literature, which could be called literature review, research questions, because your research questions come out of the literature review. What are the key terms? Do they need to be defined? Your methodology, your research approach. Do you anticipate any problems? Sorry. Significance. Feasibility is something that we really look for in that final proposal. How feasible, how viable, how achievable is it? Do you anticipate any barriers? So for example, at the moment when we're dealing with the pandemic, it's very important that students kind of have a plan A and a plan B, new students, like this is what I could do if I was able to get into the community and actually study them. But if I can't, I've got an option to maybe do virtual interviews or something like that. So we can see that your project is in fact achievable and doable. Table of contents, I mentioned that. You keep those pretty relevant and up to date. And there might be things in an appendix, perhaps depending on your study. There's just this slide as we get to the end of my talk is just a few suggestions how to develop research questions. So I don't think I'll read through all of them, but really also that it's a process of coming up with some really broad, possibly vague ideas and thinking them through, reading, talking to others, looking at other theses, other journal articles as much as you can, and trying to focus your question more over a process of time. Don't get stuck on the question. If you're receiving feedback from a supervisor that's not maybe ideal, be open to changing it, keep up to date, talk to other people, your supervisor, of course, key person. Finally, at the end of the recommendations is to condense your research questions into 2 sentences. Write them down with pride and post them next to your computer where you can see them daily. So I think that's important too, is just be proud of your topic. Also be prepared. As my experience with working with students as they start out is often they'll come in on day one, week one, and they say, this is my topic, but once they've got into it and they're researching and reading and thinking more, that can change. So be open as well that your topic could evolve quite significantly over that first term particularly. And keep asking yourself, what will we know at the end that we did not already know? Do I need to address ethical issues in the proposal? Well, I think you need to show that you're aware of them in the final proposal when you're going for confirmation, particularly if you're going to be working with groups that could be perceived as vulnerable, where there could be complex ethical issues. If you're going to be working with speakers of English or of languages other than English, because I'm assuming you'll be writing your thesis in English. But so think about how you would address things like, am I going to need to translate interviews? Am I going to need an interpreter? Who's going to do that? So those are sort of things. Of course, at UNSW and most universities, once you've got confirmed and your proposal is accepted, then you need to get your ethics approved by the University Ethics Committee, which is a separate process. And there you just submit a very much reduced version of your overall plan for your thesis. And there you will really need to address these issues of getting informed consent from the people that you want to study. But I haven't really focused on that here today. But that's something that your supervisor would be able to advise you. Now, I think this is almost my final slide. What I've put here is a colleague of mine a while ago did interviews with supervisors in Australia, and she asked them what were the criteria they used to assess students' research proposals. And this is what she came up with. So it's interesting to hear from the supervisor's perspective. So these are some of the things, and I probably could ask you to write down what you thought supervisors used and you'd come up with a similar list, but it's good to see what the supervisors said. The logic of the student's argument, that's a key thing. Remember the right to responsible, clear, logical argument, a well-focused research question, clear research objectives or aims, or a hypothesis if you're doing a quantitative study, how wide and how deeply you've read, how feasible, that's another thing we've spoken about, your critical approach to the literature, that you can take on and engage with other authors, how you justify the need for your project through the literature, that you understand current issues, you're aware and up to date, and matching of methodology and methods to your research questions, so they're appropriate. And I might have already talked through these issues. I just added them in terms of thinking about if it's a proposal that you're doing in order to apply to be accepted at the university. So I mentioned up-to-date literature, trying to tailor a proposal to a specific supervisor. If you're planning on doing a qualitative study, try not to put forward a quantitative proposal and vice versa. Look at the online profiles of the potential supervisors, and please edit, because it is off-putting to get a document from a prospective student that's got a lot of grammatical errors, obviously hasn't been proofread, and so on. So that's the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you. So I think, yeah, we got a lot of things from your presentations, and then we have several questions on the chat box. Maybe I'm going to read it, and if others would like to also ask something, and then you can also raise your hand or even type the questions. So the first question is from Bu Hikmah. So she has a question, but it's probably answered by your first of presentation, but maybe you would like to also repeat something. I have a question: how to write an interesting PhD proposal which attract a professor for being a supervisor and support us during our study? Yeah,
I think I've tried to address that, but
yeah,
I really think it's almost, as I've more or less said this, it's about doing a bit of research on your own, of looking for that idea of the compatible supervisor. So not just blanket sort of bombing everyone in a school of education or a school of linguistics, but really looking to see So maybe you do a keyword search, you've got some ideas, do a search, try and, or think about who am I reading, whose work do I like? I mean, sometimes supervisors don't have space for a new student, but it's never hurts to approach them, because, you know, if we see something that we really like and a topic that interests us and it's very close to what we're interested in, we might consider it. We might want to engage in a conversation with you at the least, which is what you want. You just don't want someone saying, delete, delete, delete. You want someone to be prepared to follow up with you. So, and I'm afraid to say that a number of the emails I get, they seem very formulaic, and they seem like they're sending it to people everywhere. So the more you kind of individualize it.
All right. Okay, thanks. And the next question, so what if the area of study for our PhD thesis proposal is different from our master thesis? So let's say the master thesis is about linguistics and the PhD is on education. So do you think that it's going to be such kind of a problem or not?
I don't think necessarily, because, you know, we know that the people can change focus. You don't necessarily want to just keep doing the same thing. So as long as you can explain why, like I did this, but while I was doing this, I became interested in other things. So I did X, and now that led me to think about Y and Z, and I'm really interested in pursuing that. And I saw your profile, and I feel like you could be a person, you know, who might be interested in my ideas. So you provide a little bit of a justification for why. We don't necessarily expect you to do the same thing at all.
Yeah, I think I also experienced the same thing. So I think while my master, my master is not also similar to what I'm doing right now in my PhD. So yeah, I think I do agree with you. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you've done because I have had a few people who like, I have a master's in engineering, but now I'm interested in education. So that's a bit more difficult, because you'd really have to explain. I would be a bit worried about that. I mean, I'd like you to have some sort of an interest in linguistics, applied linguistics, education, you know.
All right. Okay, I see. And all right, there's also another question. So what is the best methodology for PhD research proposal, quantitative or qualitative?
What's the... I can't answer that. It's really going to depend on you, what you like doing, and then finding the right match of a supervisor. So you need to look at, what am I reading? What am I interested in? My master's, did I go quantitative? Did I enjoy doing that? Like, do I want to know more about people and how they use language and what they do in communicative situations or in classrooms, you know, or am I interested more in doing a survey or corpus, which is much more quantitative, you know? So it's going to depend on, and if you like both, you can do mixed methods, which is quite challenging to do it properly, but it's becoming much more common these days. So I think, and sometimes you come in thinking you'll do one methodology and you might get exposed to other. So I would say read widely, you know, at the like on the UNSW website, for example, at UNSW Works, you can find everyone's PhD that's been submitted. Or there's an Australian website called Trove. I don't know if people know it, TROVE, which is the like the National Library of Australia. And it's got hundreds and hundreds of PhD theses there. And you can search them. And so I would look at other theses and just see what other people have done. And see what kind of methods. So you can search by education, language teaching, all those kind of things. And then you've got big databases like the North American ProQuest ones, which have all the abstracts of every dissertation submitted in the US and Canada. So, but you need a subscription to the ProQuest database. But there's so many theses you can look at.
Yeah, because it's helpful, I think. Based on my own experience, I think when I also joined in your class, and then you show us some different PhD thesis, I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, it gets because when you start off, you're not really clear on what it's got to look like at the end. Of course, the ones you see online, remember, they've been edited, they've been proofread, they've often gone to examiners and be revised. So sometimes when you look at the final thesis online, it can seem a bit scary. It's like, how am I ever going to get to that stage? But just remember that person's gone on a journey and done a lot of drafting, redrafting. But it is good to see how they look like.
Okay, next question is, I think you have also explained this, but there's also a question about what is the scope of the background of the study of our proposal? I think you have presented this, but maybe you want to add more.
So maybe is that the context, or you do need to provide some information about in the actual proposal, like particularly if you're doing a study, say you're doing a study that's based in Indonesia, you need to provide a kind of explanation of the context, because you're studying in Australia, the readers of your proposal may not be familiar with that context. And in the thesis too, you're going to have to explain it. Like say you're doing something in a classroom, you need to understand maybe something about the education system, the language policy, you know, the textbooks, when do they switch to English medium, or, you know, if it's a university study, when is it EMI or is it the local language, or so we do need to understand some of that background. Is that what the question's asking?
Okay.
And if I can talk about my own PhD, which I did when I was still living and working in South Africa, I didn't know who my examiners were going to be. They could have been anywhere in the world. And I needed to explain a lot about the context of education in South Africa. So I had a whole chapter, which was just like the history of education. And then at my university and.
All right. And hello, sir. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the question from Pak Muhammad, so I think we cannot answer your question. Another webinar, I think, from PPI Australia, I think. So it's not about scholarship talk, so I cannot pose the questions. So next from Rahman, so dear Professor Starfield, my master's degree was coursework. While working as a lecturer, I did several research. So would it be possible I relate my PhD proposal with my current research topic?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the problem that you might have is that if you're, I'm talking about it now from my position, if I was the postgraduate coordinator and I was reviewing your proposal, if you've only done a master's by coursework with no research, you haven't maybe got enough evidence of doing research independently to be accepted directly into a PhD. So we might recommend that you do a master's by research first. Or if you've published some of your own research and you've published it in a good journal, that might be helpful. But so you'd need to find out specifically what that particular university is looking for. But certainly if you've done research and had it published somewhere, that would help, and that would help with your topic, because it shows that it's a genuine interest of yours, you know, that you want to pursue.
All right, thanks. So is that okay? Because there are a lot of questions. I think so they want, yeah. So there are also some questions. I think a lot. I think right. So let me read. I hope that we still have time.
Sure.
Hi, Professor Starfield. I did my MBA in the USA, and I'm looking for PhD opportunities in business. My MBA program didn't have research component. We did a consulting project for the capstone. How much that would disadvantage me, given that I have never been going through a rigorous and demanding research experience?
Look, we don't have, sorry, I'm getting a lot of background noise. We don't get a lot of MBA people coming to education But it would depend. If you're applying to a business school, I don't know what they look for. They might look differently, because from education point of view, we definitely want a research component of some kind. And we'd want some evidence of actually having studied in the broad area of education as well. But a business school might be different. I don't know.
All right. So the next question is a bit, it's interesting. It's about if qualitatively avoid totally quantitative. I think you have also tried to highlight that, but maybe it's a bit unclear what you mean by if qualitative avoid totally quantitative.
Did I say that?
So it's about the tips, I think, in the almost the end of the slide, I think. Wait. Or
I don't know.
Or maybe we can just keep it later on. We can also discuss about it again. And from every...
No, it's. I think it's just. I don't know what that means. If qualitative avoid totally quantitative.
Oh wait.
I don't know what that is.
Okay. We can also discuss if we still have time again, I think. Next, later on, and we talk about contributions, I think. So does a proposal need to contribute to all 4 areas you mentioned, like theoretically?
No.
All right.
No, not at all. You choose which are applicable to your study. Then it's they're never going to apply to all. It's just some ideas. It's really just more like suggestions. If you're looking to try and say what your contribution is, it could fall into one of those areas. So when you're reading journal articles, try and see where the writer signals their contribution. You'll often see words like significant, my study contributes, it's pro-novel, original. Look for those kind of words and you'll be able to see where the author's telling you what the contribution is. And then you can try and get a sense of.
Yeah. I still remember in your class that you said like we make small contributions but meaningful. I still remember that one.
Yeah, of course. As I said, you're not going to get. Remember, no, it's not a Nobel Prize. It's just a small. We know how they say we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're just something small but important. Yes.
All right. Thanks. And then. What is the most significant issue that makes research proposal is rejected so far, especially for EFL applicants? So,
okay, so you're talking about the proposals that to be accepted into the university. I think topics that, as I said, a suitable supervisor. It just depends on the mix of what's available, who's available to supervise. A really poorly put together proposal that doesn't reflect more current research, is poorly written. There's a lot of grammar, language mistakes. It hasn't been proofread. All those things are like, well, how serious is this person? So we want to, I mean, sometimes it's not your fault. You might have a good proposal, but there's just a gap between where that what the supervisor is interested in and where you're coming from. It just might be a mismatch. But I think anything you can do to make it an easy read, something that a person that is writer responsible, that a person can read quite quickly, get the gist of it, see that you're up to date with the field, that you've got an idea of what would be new or interesting, and that you've got some experience that you could actually do the study. Those are the key things.
All right. And next question is how to demonstrate the depth of our reading in our PhD proposal, because you highlighted seems like it's not about less of library, right? But how we make such kind of a good argument.
Okay. I just want to add one thing about the previous question, because like myself and my colleagues, we are TESOL people. We work with speakers of English as another language. We're not going to judge you if there's some grammatical errors or some grammar mistakes. That's not the main thing, but we do want to see that you've taken care to try and minimize grammatical errors and so on. We understand that there'll be a few, perhaps. Do you know what I mean? We're not going to judge you on English necessarily. So the depth question is really through the literature review.
All right.
To see that you've covered the main themes, the main areas, particularly the proposal when you're going for confirmation. You haven't left out some key areas, and you've developed an approach that's critical. That's not just a list of everything you've read. So we want you to read widely and we want you to read deeply, but we also want you to show how you're using that literature to build the argument for why your study is important. So that's why I say you need identify key themes and group the literature together, maybe under the themes, and be aware that, you know, there's been people writing about it, and show that.
Okay. All right. So so I need to also remind all participants, because we have limited time, like until 10:30 Indonesian time, or yeah, we just have like 10 minutes for these QA sessions. Okay. So I think we cannot like ask Professor Sustav with all questions. Maybe you can also email her, or the committee will try to also collect all the questions, and then we'll email so that we can also get them back about the answers.
But you know, Jun, and I didn't show you my final slide actually, which is a reference list.
Oh,
and
right,
I've provided a lot of references that could be useful. And for some of the books on research proposals or research methods,
okay,
you can actually download some of the chapter book lines. So I provided those links as well. So that might be helpful to people as well. So when I send you my slides, you'll see.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm going to also share all, the recommendations, I think, from you, I think, yeah, that will be really helpful for the participants. Next questions. So maybe you would like to share the experience, like, can you tell us one of the most unique proposals you have accepted to supervise, maybe? So, Sue, can you hear me? Sue, can you hear me?
Connection problem?
Maybe connection problem, right? Wait. Let's wait.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
So can you tell us one of the most unique proposals you have accepted to supervise?
I will tell you one story that might be encouraging. Is that a few years ago, a student who I accepted and went on to do extremely well, came with a proposal which was interesting. And in the year that we worked together on the proposal before confirmation, her topic changed completely. She went very far away from that original idea. I mean, there were elements of it, but the actual study she did was completely in a different context. So I think that's what can happen as well, that people come in with one topic, and then as you get to know them and work with them, and they get exposed to different ideas, and you're talking and they're exposed to your ideas. And through that process, when it works well, you can end up with quite a different proposal. Process of so I don't know if it's necessarily the proposal that you come in with, it's what you come out with.
Yeah. Okay, next, I think I still have the time, I think 7 minutes. Do we need to explain the theoretical framework in our proposal?
Do we need to explain what?
The theoretical framework in our proposal.
Yeah, in the actual, well, not necessarily in the one you submit to look for a supervisor, but when you're actually submitting for confirmation, as you would know, you need to have a theoretical framework. And I didn't really talk about that too much because that's something you're going to have to work out with your supervisor and through your feedback. But you do need to have, and that comes often, it comes from the literature review.
Yeah. Okay, next question. One of my colleagues said, when you do your PhD, think of your research whether the topic is worth or feasible 10 years from now. Do you have any suggestion to make our research can contribute that long? So
you don't know when you start out, you know.
Okay.
I mean, people are still citing articles that I wrote from my PhD, which I submitted in 1999. So, you know, you just don't know. In our field, in applied linguistics and TESOL, it's quite slow for the uptake from our research. Some fields are much quicker, like the sciences and medicine. And if they, you know, it's very up to date all the time. But in our field, you just don't know what the afterlife of your thesis is going to be. You just try and do a good thesis on a topic that interests you. You know, what's really important is to have a topic that's going to motivate you and sustain you for 4 years. You need to have something that you feel engaged in, that's important to you. And that it's going to keep you going and interest you for that time period. So don't just take a topic because you think the supervisors likes that topic or other people like that topic, or you know, it's going to get me a job. Of course it will help with getting you a job, but it's got to be something that comes out of you, why you are interested in that topic.
Yeah, I think my own experience too, I think I also changed like the topic so many times, like even like 3 months before my own confirmation. So it's like, I don't know, my up and down experience until I decided that so this could be the area of expertise for my own research, I think.
Yeah, well, it's part of that learning process. I mean, the PhD is a huge learning process. And that's what's amazing about it, because it's you know, you have that time in your life where you can really read and think and write and talk and, you know, go to conferences, meet people, talk to people. It's an amazing opportunity. You just grow so much through it. And you're a different person at the end of it to the person that it's really an incredible opportunity.
Yeah. And I think this will be the last question. Yeah, sorry to skip some questions because we have limited time. I got a project about testing strategies to improve reading ability and engagement of students in the reading process, and my supervisor has accepted it. However,
congratulations.
Is it possible if I change my proposal there with different topic, for instance, dealing with technology-enhanced language learning? So what do you think?
I can't say. I mean, you mean with the same supervisor?
Yeah, maybe same supervisor.
if it's the same supervisor, you need to talk to them. If you want a different supervisor, that could be a challenge. You need to work through it. But certainly talk to the supervisor and see what they say. Just have a frank. If you really want to change, then you've got to be brave enough to have the conversation with them.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sue. I think you have like answered all the questions from the participants, and then it's such kind of a great moment for us, I think, to get a lot of, I think, enlightenment from you. So I think, would you like to also share the slide, I think, to me, Sue, so that I can also like post something for the participants, especially some references?
I'll send you them, Junjun, a bit later on.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So before we end this session, so would you like to turn on the camera, because we are going to have like photo sessions? So is that okay? So we are going to have photo sessions. Please turn on the camera.
Mine's on.
Okay, Bu Ratna, maybe you can help to take a picture.
Wait, Pak Junjun.
Okay.
Gallery view, yeah. All right. So we're gonna start with the first screen, yeah. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3. Yeah, okay. Second one.
Okay.
Okay. The third. Okay. And then the fourth. All right. Next. The fifth. Okay. The sixth. All right. 7. Okay. And then the last screen. All right. Done.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you very much, Starfield, for your presentations. I think hopefully, and then we can meet again in the next upcoming event, maybe. And then for all participants, thank you for your participations, and then see you in the upcoming event from APSPBI. Good afternoon, and then Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you
Sue.
very much.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
bye, Sue.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Pak Henry, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam, Bu
Waalaikumsalam.
Meti.
Hai
Ratna,
Bu
apa
Meti,
kabar?
halo. Ini senior saya nih Bu Meti. Halo Bu Meti. Bu Meti udah nulis proposal ya?
On the way, on the way.
Semester berapa berarti kalau nulis proposal 3 atau 4?
Masuk di 4 besok.
Oh, masuk 4. Masuk 4 berarti udah mulai submit proposal gitu ya Bu Meti?
Ya, bimbingan-bimbingan.
Oh,
Udah
bimbingan.
diminta semester sekarang bimbingan.
Oh, kalau dapat pembimbing di semester berapa berarti?
Udah, sama PA sebetulnya sekarang sudah mulai dari PA kita.
Dari mulai semester 3. Dari mulai semester 3 ya?
Iya.
Topiknya apa Bu Met?
Masih berkutat di sana saja.
Apa tuh?
Mantap. Masih ngobrolin young learners and assessment-nya.
Wah, mantap yang learners ya.
Masih bermain di sana. Bismillah. Itu anggota APSPBI diperpanjang gimana tuh? Pak Henry.
Ada ini ketentuannya sejak Rakernas di Kalimantan tuh. Nanti saya share ya. Ada kenaikan iuran kalau nggak salah ya.
Nah itu.
Jadi berapa Pak Henry?
50.000 kalau nggak salah.
Waktu itu kan terakhir kan 125 ya.
Ya.
Tunggu program selanjutnya ya, PSPBI Jabar.
Siap, masih banyak kayaknya. Halo Mbak Bita.
Halo Kang Jun, mantap pisan, matur nuwun sangat pemanasannya.
Segera terbang ke Australia. Ini Mbak Bita ini juga UNSW students ini nih, dari LPDP ini.
Insya Allah, semoga ya Allah diizinkan. Mantap APSBI Jabar. Luar biasa, sehat-sehat semuanya. Izin live ya, terima kasih.
Oke, mangga.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Pak Supi gimana Pak Supi ini?
Ya Pak Junjun. Jos, mantul su.
Kemana aja jadinya? Australia. Hongkong ya.
Insya Allah deh Pak Henry kita bareng nih tahun ini agendakan.
Ayo Pak.
Mau kemana? Pak Supi mau kemana? Bu Supi mau kemana?
Mudah-mudahan bisa nyusul Kang Junjun ini di Aussie.
Mantap, saya tunggu.
Insya Allah lah. Insya Allah, berjuang lagi.
Sip.
Ya.
Ini ada di Makassar nih, Pak Waludi nih, Mas Bro. Gimana nih?
Bu Nuraini gimana Bu Met kabarnya?
Alhamdulillah.
Masih suka
sibuk.
kontak?
Ada kemarin kontak. Alhamdulillah sibuk, semakin sibuk.
Iyalah ya, Ibu Dekan lah ya.
Ibu Dekan.
Ibu Dekan.
Ibu Dekan.
Pak Rahmat juga ada nih, Pak Rahmat ya, ada nih.
Ya.
Alhamdulillah semester 1 beres Bu Met.
Beres, alhamdulillah.
Nggak kerasa ya kalau dari
tinggal nunggu nilai ya.
Iya.
Mudah-mudahan bagus-bagus nilainya.
Blessing in disguise tuh. Nggak usah ke Bandung, atau selesai gitu ya.
Jadi nggak berasa ininya kuliahnya.
Nanti ini mungkin recordingnya bisa di-share juga nanti mungkin Pak Hendrik. Ini kan ada recordingnya, di stop dulu, mungkin Pak Hendrik bisa di stop dulu recordingnya.
Bu Meti kalau untuk persiapan publikasi berarti udah ini ya, udah dimulai ya. Karena jadi persyaratan juga ya, Bu Meti?
Publikasi iya buat disertasi. Kalau untuk
buat
tahap
persyaratan juga ya.
Seminar proposal, presenter dulu di konferensi internasional.
Oh, kalau untuk proposal?
Ya, untuk proposal. Sama itu nilai PTSOL atau IELTS atau TOEFL-nya tuh 575.
Oh. Kalau TOEFL 575.
575.
TOEFL ITP.
Iya, ITP. Atau
kalau
PTSOL. Boleh PTSOL juga. Yang balai bahasa.
IELTS berapa?
IELTS berapa ya? 6,5 gitu kalau nggak salah.
Oh, itu untuk syarat proposal?
Iya.
Iya.
Mantap ya.
Mantap persyaratannya itu.
Baru proposal tuh Pak Jun.
Jadi
nanti berubah pikiran jadi dipakai buat terbang aja ke Aussie lah, nyusul Kang Jun kalau
maju-maju.
Iya, kalau terus ya bisa langsung apply lagi LPDP itu atau apa gitu loh. Itu. Kalau Pak Supi kemana rencana Pak Supi ini, Pak Supi?
Pak Junjun.
Rencananya kemana di kampusnya?
Belum tahu nih. Kemarin itu kan ditolak kan beasiswanya, bukan kampusnya. Sebetulnya kan udah diterima 2 Juni kan kemarin itu di Newcastle sama Western Sydney.
Udah nggak bisa.
Sudah hangus kan?
Udah nggak bisa, nggak ada. Jadi yang ada. Ya
mulai dari awal lagi mencoba.
Nyari yang kampus yang sekiranya udah all departments diterima gitu aja, yang lebih aman sih.
Iya, kayak gitu. Insyaallah.
Nah, mantap lah.
Iya. Ini IELTS-nya sudah expired juga. Padahal ini
3 juta.
Iya, ini selain 3 juta kan juga turun naik juga kan, nggak bisa nggak konsisten juga kita.
Mendapatkan nilainya.
Iya.
Minta ampun
nggak selalu konsisten. Saya 2 kali.
Nah, itu Bu. Saya sampai 2 kali juga itu. Ternyata berubah-ubah nilainya. Aduh, repot deh.
Ya minimal rating harus tinggi sih itu sih.
Nah, apalagi kayak Kang Junjun kan LPDP mintanya sampai 7. Waduh. Luar biasa tuh perjuangannya itu.
Kalau mau aman sih memang di 7 ya.
Iya.
7.
Perlu belajar sama Kang Junjun tuh tipsnya gimana sampai 7.
udah hampir lupa. Fokus intinya sih fokus aja 3 bulan, nggak usah nyentuh yang lain-lain aja sih.
Gitu ya sebenarnya ya.
Ya kalau kita dibebani yang lain-lain ya susah juga Bu Ratna itu. Susah.
Iya benar.
Nggak bisa. Minimal 1 bulan intensif lah gitu. Nggak ngerjain ngapa-ngapain ya fokus di sana aja udah. Jadi kalau misalkan masih ada kayak listening, masih nggak yakin sama nilai, itu pasti belum akurat. Kalau saya tuh di listening tuh udah bisa, saya di sini salahnya pasti salah 3, salah 4, salah 5 gitu. Udah yakin dengan nilai itu. Harus bisa kayak gitu loh.
Harus sudah sampai kayak gitu baru ikut tes ya, berani ya. Belum.
Saya kan kayak listening udah sampai tahapan itu tuh udah gitu, kayak ya udah pengen muntah aja itu soal listening tuh. Oh ini kayaknya ini salah. Gitu sih. Pokoknya kalau listening kalau tas 1 masih banyak yang salah, nggak 100%, jangan harap dapat 6,5 atau 7 biasanya.
Harus betul semua ya tas satunya ya.
Tas satunya ya.
Iya, Bu Met, mangga Bu Met ya, silahkan.
Ya, Bu Meti. Terima
Insya
kasih.
Sami mau hadir itu, ada yang sidang promosi dokter.
Oh,
di Zoom
via
juga.
Zoom.
Zoom.
Boleh nggak ikutan?
Boleh, ntar aku share WA
Bu Met
ya.
share linknya ya, mau ya di WA ya.
Sekarang nih setengah 11 sekarang.
Oke, siap.
Yuk, Assalamualaikum.
Nuhun. Iya, waalaikumsalam.
Mana Pak Henry nih?
Bu Lydia.
Abah Heli nggak ikut, Kang John?
Iya, ini Abah Heli kemana ya?
Nggak tahu, lagi sibuk mungkin.
Kayaknya masih ngajar ya, mungkin belum habis
Kayaknya.
pertemuannya kan ngajarnya.
Kayaknya.
Bu Lydia
gimana?
Ya Bu, ini tadi di mobil tadi nih.
Oh iya tadi kita masuk jam 10 kurang jam 9 kurang 10 tuh admit Bu Lydia dulu, tapi aku nyari Bu Lydia mana ya. Ternyata belum masuk.
Iya, saya ini di baru nyampe Jakarta ini, itu mobil spionnya dicuri orang.
Ya
mobil saya
Allah.
dua itu. Jadi ini mau ngambil ke sana ke bengkel. Mantap, Kang Jun, luar biasa, keren banget itu.
Siap.
Oma Su.
Oma ya. Ya apalagi kalau ikutan.
Tapi dia tuh bukan promotornya Pak Junjun. Dia ini
bukan
ya.
Beliau di metodologi ya, Kang? Ininya ya, mata kuliahnya ya?
Enggak, di itu writing dia, di writing, academic writing. Makanya kan bukunya juga tentang PhD thesis writing. Kalau kita masuk kelasnya itu lebih enak lagi gitu, 1 term 4 bulan. Saya kan 3 bulan itu belajar sama beliau tuh tentang PhD thesis itu kayak gimana. Menarik sih, orangnya yang paling banget ya, orangnya baik banget.
Iya, kelihatan.
Baik banget
mau ngajarin dari dasar gitu ya kayaknya.
Baik banget dia mah.
Kang Juli itu dapat ini ya, dapat kelas beliau ya, 1 semester itu ya.
Hah? Iya.
Dapat kelas beliau masuk kelas beliau ya.
Dapat kelas beliau. Kalau PhD itu kan sebenarnya nggak ada kelas, tapi kalau memang ada kelas untuk PhD students biasanya ada tawaran, misalkan metodologi, nulis. Nah kita tinggal minta izin supervisor, ikutan kelasnya, nggak dikasih tugas, jadi nggak dapat tugas kita mah. Jadi kalau students mah boleh ngerjain tugas, boleh enggak, yang penting sit in aja kayak gitu. Gratis.
Bu Nana mau terbang kayaknya Bu Nana nih.
Aku tuh ininya letter of offer-nya tuh expire di Juli 2021 Pak John.
Nah.
Jadi kalau Juli 2021 nggak ada progres ya sudah lah, berarti memang takdirnya ini. Gimana Bu?
LOE-nya di
Curtin. Itu gitu. Juli 2021 ya. Nggak kerasa nih waktu 6 bulan lagi.
Itu udah masuk nggak di LPDP itu masuk lagi nggak?
Nggak ada, nah itu dia nggak ada.
Nggak ada.
Rilis yang kemarin tuh kan emang benar-benar ketat banget ya, cuma
apalagi yang pandemik ya.
Yang pandemik, yang versi pandemik tuh hanya ya Allah 10 universitas.
Ya. Mungkin sekarang udah mulai dibuka lagi kayaknya mungkin.
Iya.
Ini kayaknya. Ya mudah-mudahan lah. Ya mau Bu di LN, mau di DN juga, yang penting ya harus beasiswa aja Bu Ratna pokoknya.
Iya pastinya. Ya itu makanya jadi berjuang lagi IELTS-nya ya. Sama-sama ternyata di UPI juga buat proposal harus pakai IELTS juga.
Iya.
Lagi ya dengan gitu lagi.
Iya. Mendingan buat proposal aja S3.
Sekalian ya. Niatinnya sekalian gitu ya.
Biar mantap lagi gitu. Nah ini ada Pak Rahmat juga. Pak Rahmat kemana Mang? Lagi meeting ya. Pak Henry.
Pak Henry, agenda berikutnya gimana?
Agenda berikutnya, katanya tadi itu briefing pengurus dulu. Atau gimana?
Iya, briefing dulu aja.
Atau ini diakhiri dulu, nanti kita bisa.
Nah, silakan. Mungkin saya Bu Ratna mungkin sama MC aja.
Ini pakai closing juga. Kirain udah langsung automatically ya. Oke, alhamdulillah. Finally we get to the last session in this event. So on behalf of the committee, we would like to thanks once again to all the audience, and then hopefully what we had conducted will be useful for us, especially to those who are willing to pursue PhD or doctoral degree. We wish you all good luck with your proposal. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sampai ketemu ya Bapak-bapak yang lainnya.
Terima